I'm Dr. Mike Chamberlain from the University of Georgia, and I'm here today to join the DU podcast to discuss wild turkey DNA, which is a large collaborative project amongst several groups focused on trying to understand genetics of wild turkey populations. And today we're going to dive into some of the details about how to participate, sample submission, and other topics.
Can we do a mic check, please?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brasher.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jared Henson. And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harrison, and today I have with me two very, very special and smart individuals, Dr. Mike Chamberlain and also Dr. Mike Brasher. I have two doctors. I feel totally out of place. It's like I've said before, I have a PhD. I'm poor, hungry, and determined, but that's about all I have to my name. But we are so excited to be here and have Dr. Mike Chamberlain with us in studio. Dr. Mike Brasher is also a co-host of the DU podcast. But we have some extremely, extremely exciting news that I'm probably most pumped about than I've ever been at Ducks Unlimited when I heard that this was a possibility, and then it came to fruition, and now we get to share it with you guys. But I'm not going to be the one to say it. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Mike Brasher to talk about what it is that we're introducing.
And then I'm going to toss it to Dr. Mike Chamberlain so he can actually tell us a little bit more about it. Yeah. But yeah, this came together really quick over the past few months. Super exciting to be part of this. And listeners of the podcast or anybody that's kind of associated with Ducks Unlimited will have heard about duckDNA. Everybody probably knows what's going to happen now. Have heard about duckDNA over the past few years, and we've had tremendous success. We had tremendous engagement and participation by thousands, literally thousands of hunters across the U.S. And we are proud to be partnering on the announcement and delivery of wild turkey DNA.
Yes, sir.
So this is something that So Mike and I actually overlapped at Mississippi State 2.5 decades ago.
Yes,
now, it seems
many years ago.
So we know one another and have known one another for a long time. I've kept up with Mike's career and what he was doing. And I guess you had come into contact with Phil and got to know Dr. Phil Vretsky as a result of some genetics work that you were doing, and y'all having the conversation. And all I know is I got a text message from Phil one night. And he said, hey, just get off the phone with Chamberlain. He's interested in pursuing something for turkeys similar to what we did with duckDNA. Is this something that we'd want to be part of? I said, absolutely. We would love to be part of this. So wild turkey DNA, I think the logo was shown there a few minutes ago, and it was so the logo in itself is a collaborative effort. I will acknowledge here all the people involved in this: the National Wild Turkey Federation, Ducks Unlimited, the Wild Turkey Lab, the Low Country Game Bird Foundation, and the University of Texas, El Paso. And we have jumped in both feet all the way up to our chin right now in trying to get this implemented in time for spring turkey season. There are some states that already have open season right now. But we'll talk about the kind of formal release date of this. I guess this is part of it. When people hear this, it will be live in some sense. But I have to give credit to the folks that contributed to this logo here. So on our side, Katie Tucker, who folks would have seen on an earlier episode, contributed some creative thought and design to parts of this. And then on your side, Pete Mueller, is that
Pete Mueller with the National Wild Turkey Federation. Yep.
So just first up, what a fantastic logo. Matt, whenever you saw it a minute ago, you were like, holy smokes.
I saw it on the screen. We were talking about it, and I was like, how have I not seen this new logo? And then I peeked over, and I saw Chris's screen over there, and I was like, I've got to have that sticker.
Yeah. We got to get stickers first.
Yeah.
So, all right, what is this about? We've talked about duckDNA at length on numerous episodes where we're looking at issues such as the game farm mallard genes, kind of getting into wild mallard populations, hybridization of different duck species, and some of the cool things we're learning there is building a massive genomic database for mallards in North America. From a wild turkey DNA standpoint, you got some pretty interesting questions that you're wanting to look at as well.
Yeah, for sure. This literally started Super Bowl Sunday. Literally, this was a phone call between Phil Lavretsky and I, who's collaborating on some other genetics work that I'm doing. And the conversation came up, like I said, Phil, if I gave you a sample of a bird, could you tell me whether it's a wild bird, whether it's a hybrid of two wild birds? Could you tell me if there's domestic, genetics involved? And he said, of course I can. And I said, well, here's why I'm asking, because I kind of have two interests that I've been looking at for many years. One of them is you see a lot of instances on social media of wild turkeys, we think that are wild turkeys, that have odd plumage, and such as color varieties and different odd plumage characters. And we really don't understand the origin of those birds. There's never really been an assessment of color phases in wild turkeys, or the possibility that they are true and exist. We don't understand like the origin of a lot of these birds that you see. And so that was my initial curiosity. And as Phil and I talked, I said, and my bigger curiosity is there hasn't been a range-wide assessment of genetics on wild turkeys in over 20 years. And the genetics field has evolved so rapidly that I think it's past time for us to explore some of these bigger questions that are facing managers, whether it be genetic diversity or hybridization issues. And so that's kind of where the conversation started. And then literally it was you getting that text from Phil and him texting me back and saying, why don't you and Mike talk? And 5 weeks later, here we are.
Wow. It's like within 2 weeks, we as a collective said, yeah, we can do this. So from Ducks Unlimited standpoint, we are happy to share what we have learned through duckDNA in terms, and Ducks Unlimited will be part of this collaborative project through the administration of some of the interface between hunters and then the science collaboration, NWTF, and Phil. So our team is going to sort of play that role of using some of the technology, some of the web application that we developed for duckDNA. We're going to modify all that to make it custom for wild turkey DNA. But then our people, our staff are going to be the ones kind of manning some of the some of the emails, interacting the day-to-day and interacting with the hunters that we select to participate in this. And so we're absolutely thrilled to be able to help with that. We've had our chiefs involved. You arrived here today, and you met a lot of our leadership up front, and it was cool kind of walking around the building with you and seeing how excited people got to talk turkey science, turkey management, turkey regulations, turkey harvest with you. I mean, we were probably walking the halls. You were talking to people for like an hour. So point is, I mean, this is important to Ducks Unlimited because many of our members are also obsessive turkey hunters.
Sure.
that guy right there being one of them. And our conservation work overlaps these
Oh, for
birds as
sure.
well in a
Yeah,
lot
sure.
of ways. Not every place, but in a lot of places, the work that we do for ducks benefits turkeys. A lot of the work that NWTF does benefits for turkeys, will benefit ducks in some ways. So there's a lot of overlap, and it was just a natural thing for us to want to partner on.
Yeah, and from my perspective, my objectives, the things that I want to try to accomplish, duck DNA is there's already a model there. So for me personally, and for the Wild Turkey Lab, it was really a no-brainer. It's why reinvent or even attempt to reinvent the wheel when you've already done it well. Yeah.
I'm super just excited to see too, because the feedback that we have gotten through duckDNA is unbelievable. Just through social media alone, like every time we post every Wednesday evening a photo of the results of a waterfowl species and the percentage, the numbers are just like people comment and share and like, and like it's some of our most engaging posts. So people want this. Like people are engaging with this. So whenever Dr. Mike pulled me in his office a little while back, he's like, Matt, this is a possibility. I was like, no way. And like, I just had some questions. So I've got some questions for you, because I'm sure some of our listeners and viewers have these same type questions the same way as I did. So of course, it's the first time that we'll be doing this. So how will the selection process go for somebody? Because there's going to be a ton of people out there saying, well, I want this because, I know that I've already got this bird on camera, and if I kill it, I know that I want to find out exactly what it is. So how will that selection process go of selecting a certain individual, and also how many samples will be in the first year?
So this first year, we're focusing mostly on these birds that have odd plumage, right? So you harvest a bird, it has odd looking plumage, white, black, red, something that is vastly different than how
Something's
typical wild turkey looks. You will just go to wildturkeydna.com and you will register to receive a kit.
Gotcha.
I think it'll say request a kit.
Yep.
And now will you have to submit a photo of your turkey too?
You will. So you'll go through the registration process. You will be asked some very basic questions, your name, your address, because obviously you have to be mailed the kit. It will ask you the general area that you harvested the bird in. It does not have to be specific to the site. I'm sensitive to that as a turkey hunter.
Yeah.
You'll be asked a couple of other basic questions. Was it an adult or a juvenile, Tom or a Jake type of thing. And then you'll be asked to upload several images of the bird. Wow. And you'll be shown some examples of what those images need to look like. One of them is the standard, I'll call it the turkey hunter hero pose, because I take pictures like that, with the bird laying there with the fan out and the wings spread. And then the second image that we are requesting is simply the bird laying on its side, which some state agencies are now requiring when you check your bird in the field.
Oh, wow.
So that through this image, I can see the beard, I can see the legs, I can see the wing coloration, which you may not get in that other image.
I see.
And so I'm hoping between those two, as we vetted this amongst ourselves, and I've sent these images to dozens and dozens of turkey hunters that are close friends of mine, I think we'll capture with just two images pretty much the plumage of the bird.
I see.
I'm going to back up just a little bit here, because this is one of the things that Mike and I and others have been thinking hard about, is exactly how is this going to work. And so Mike described that someone shoots an interesting looking bird. They'll go to wildturkeyDNA.com. There will be a link that says request a kit. When they click that, that will direct them to send an email to Katie.
Yep.
And they will provide whatever information they requested, a photo, and I think they'll just have to request a kit and submit a photo. And then you and Katie are going to kind of go back and forth to determine if that person is going to be accepted into the project
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
year.
skipped a step.
And
My
then all
apologies.
that other stuff
Yeah.
will happen. Yeah.
And
Granted,
that's basically
We're
just
still early.
Yeah, 5 weeks ago it was.
Yeah,
Can we
that's
do
right.
this?
Yeah.
And now-
Because it is a little bit different. It's very similar. We decided it's going to run very similar to what we do for the hybrid submissions for duckDNA, because that's the way
I
that
see.
happens. For the regular aspect of duckDNA, remember we had like 3,500 or 4,000 people apply to get a kit, for one of these kits that were sent out at the beginning of the season, yada, yada, yada. This is a little bit different because we want 75 kits or 75 vials, and we want to make sure we get 75
And
samples.
that was my next question: is how many sample kits will go out? Because we haven't talked about that yet.
we budgeted this year for 75.
Okay.
And honestly, that was it wasn't kind of a back of the napkin calculation. It was really kind of, okay, what is a realistic number for what we might possibly be able to obtain? Because we don't really, and that's part of why we're doing the research. I don't really know what the prevalence of these odd plumage birds will be.
Yeah.
You see quite a few images every year on social media, but I don't know how many of these birds are being harvested. So we thought 75 was realistic, and that was our target.
Yeah.
Do you want to show some of these? I have some of the
Yes,
images.
absolutely.
So I'm not a turkey guy. I'm not a turkey ecologist. I only started turkey hunting 3 years ago. So I'm learning. I'm having to learn a whole lot of stuff. I even have some photos in here of the different subspecies. But if we can go to some of these images here, and Mike, you can. What am I looking at here?
Well, we don't fully know. There's several possibilities that you have with birds that look like this. You could be looking at a wild turkey that has odd plumage. You could be looking at a heritage variety turkey, which is a number of varieties that originally were developed by crossing domestic birds with wild birds. Or you could be looking at something in between. You could be looking at wild, at birds that are living in the wild but are genetically, introgressed. There's been breeding amongst wild birds and less than wild birds. So that's what we want to understand, and we also want to understand, how common is this, and what do the birds. So if we were to take one of the birds in this image and test it genetically, what would we find? That's what we're seeking, because images like that show up every year from hunters that are there. I mean, these birds are living in the wild, right?
But now those birds that I just showed, those four, what heritage breeds are these? Do you know?
Well, the ones in the foreground are like bourbon reds or bourbon buffs, and I admittedly I don't know all the varieties of these. From talking with folks that breed these birds, there are quite a few, more than a handful, and so yeah.
One thing we talked a little bit about before the podcast episode 2 was you were talking about how genetics can skip a couple generations whenever it comes to a certain species, or sorry, not certain species, but some of the plumage and stuff like that in the turkey. And, one of the things that I found so fascinating is like you could, literally just skip a couple generations of a turkey and then those genes show back up.
Yes, I'm not a geneticist, which is why Phil Lavretsky's involved in this. But from what I can understand from talking with people is it's not uncommon in turkeys to have recessive traits, which a lot of these colors are recessive traits.
Yeah.
To have those traits skip generations and then suddenly appear because you kind of catch a certain male breeding with a certain female, and they may both have that recessive trait, and then suddenly it gets expressed in one bird or several birds, and that may be, this is complete hypothesis on my part, which is why this work is going about. Is just, okay, so does that occur? And if it does, what do those birds look like? And if these traits do skip generations, then could that be a partial, at least, explanation for why you talk to people and they say, well, we haven't seen a bird that has, for instance, white plumage in 10 years. And then suddenly
Boom,
there was
yeah.
one from that seemed like it popped up out of the ground. And is that a partial explanation for that? And I'm also curious, I talk to people quite frequently that often see these traits in their wild flocks. So for instance, I talked to a gentleman yesterday while I was headed to the airport to come here who said, I see birds, particularly hens, I see one or two every year in my general area. And this gentleman lives out in the Midwest, and he said, to be frank with you, Mike, it's not, I don't pay any attention to it anymore. I see these birds quite frequently. And so that has me thinking, okay, so what's the origin of those birds?
Do you think, and you may not know, I'm not sure how much you've looked into this, but so game farm mallards, we know they're released for the purpose of hunting, of shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any indication that people may be releasing these intentionally, or are these just kind of wandering off from people's backyards? Could it be a little bit of both? Do we not know?
From the conversations I've had with folks that raise particularly heritage birds, it's very likely a combination of those two. From the conversations I've had, it's not uncommon at all for wild turkeys to come into farmsteads and interact or attempt to interact with these birds. It's also not uncommon for a bird to escape and to end up, down the road in a wild flock. And if that's the case, then that is partially an explanation.
I can think of, while you were saying that, I was calculating in my brain. I can think of 4 places that I have turkey hunted that there was a raised turkey in a pen or either roaming around in the yard. So, I mean, that's fascinating to think about, if that turkey's going out in the woods an acre over, 2 acres over, where there's clearly a lot of turkeys, are they mingling and how does that work? I've never even really,
I think it's important to because I've been on a hunt where an odd plumage bird was harvested. And from talking with...
Have you ever harvested one?
No.
Okay.
No, I haven't. But on this particular hunt, my buddy was fired up to shoot this bird because they had been seeing this bird for 7 years.
Wow.
And so this bird was feral. And I think that's important to understand is this is not like a game farm turkey.
Yeah. Got out and stayed out.
And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. If that's what we're seeing, at least in some of these instances, that it's a bird that's traced to one of these varieties, if that's the case, then the question is, well, how is that occurring? And if one of the possible mechanisms is these birds are just escaping or whatever, and they're mingling with turkeys, then that's consistent with what some hunters that I know and my friends, situation, because I was there, is that bird had become a wild bird.
Yeah.
It was, we don't know that it was a wild turkey, but it was a bird living in the wild that was living with birds that looked like wild turkeys. He just looked different.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me because when I go back and look at the early text that were the foundation for who I ended up becoming as a scientist, I read these books and I looked at these sources and I was fascinated by the fact that you had turkeys that looked different than other turkeys. And which is similar. I'm a passionate duck hunter too, and I've never killed a duck that looked like, a hybrid between two other birds. And I've always thought that was so interesting, incredibly interesting that occurs in the wild. And so as a young scientist, I read these sources and I thought to myself, this is incredibly interesting to me. What facilitates a bird looking that different, right? And in nature. And then as as I progressed, I've realized that we've never really dug into this.
No.
And so now's, with duckDNA and my collaboration with Phil, now just seemed like the opportunity that
Was right.
let's try, let's see, and we've talked about this today, is this project literally is the microcosm for, we can either talk about it or we can do it. And because in a few weeks, it was like, we went from talking about it on Super Bowl Sunday to doing it on the Monday.
That's
I mean,
unbelievable.
it was literally that quick.
Yeah.
We got to rolling.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Mike.
Well, I was gonna see if we could go back to the video or to the graphic here, because this is about more than just these interesting looking birds.
Mhm,
We'll talk
mhm.
about some of that, but I did want to show a few more of these heritage breeds. I did a lot of sleuthing online here over the past few
Mhm,
days, which because I have no clue what any of these things are. So we got French turkey. You ever heard these names? French turkey. What is that? Dandon.
Mhm, mhm.
A buff, black turkey,
Bourbon
royal
red.
palm. I've heard you mention that one a couple of
Mhm.
times. Is that what we were looking at earlier? You said
Yes.
and then there's the bourbon red, Narragansett,
Narragansett. Yeah.
the white Holland, and then the bronze.
Yeah.
And are most of these the heritage breeds? I mean, it's male and female, but are males more popular than females? What do you know about
I
any
honestly
of that? That's
don't.
not your.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you, Mike. Until recently, this was something that I was interested in, and I saw myself at some point. I said, one of these days, I really want to dig into this. But I'm not a heritage breeder. I don't raise these birds, but I've spoken with enough people that have, to be quite frank with you, have been so forthcoming and so helpful and so informative and enlightening to me when I listen, when I try to understand their interest in these birds, and they're beautiful. You look at these birds, and if you're the type of person that is interested in these types of birds, they're stunning.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
One thing I'm interested in too with this is, you talked just a minute ago, Dr. Mike, about how that one turkey, for instance, was 7 years old, right?
Mhm.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, what is the average give or take of an Eastern age? Like, what is life expectancy for an Eastern turkey?
It really depends on hunting pressure and activity.
Okay.
In lightly pressured or populations that have very low harvest and low pressure, it's not uncommon. We've had banded birds that were recovered, 6, 7, 8, 9 years later.
I wonder what like, of course they're not hunted, but like farm raised turkeys, are they, will they typically live longer? Like, we
don't know.
Don't know.
Yeah.
But that would be
Once they so if the hypothesis is okay that at least some of these birds that are being harvested are traced back to heritage varieties. Do they have differential survival
That's what
as wild birds once they enter into wild flocks? I don't know.
That was my thinking.
know.
Is like, if those farm raised, get interchanged with the wild, is that the genetics? Will they live long? Like, it's crazy to think about all these different scenarios.
Does any state allow the harvest of hen turkeys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to be interested to see, if you get any of these, heritage hybrid birds in a female.
Yep. And from talking with, if you go back and look at the earlier text, and even in my own field research, my trapping crews have caught birds that appeared, based on every piece of information we had in front of us, to be wild turkeys that had odd plumage, red color phase. But, we rarely capture males that have the odd plumage. It seems to mostly be females.
Really?
But again, my work, we disproportionately focus on females when we're trapping, because we're studying reproduction and that type thing. But yeah, there are a lot of states that allow hen harvest even in the spring. And so I don't know what we're going to find. Maybe we're going to end up having some samples submitted that are from females. I don't know.
I'm excited too, just to say, I feel like there's going to be a lot of upset turkey hunters too, because I know people, man, I killed this red phase, I killed this red phase turkey. And really and truly, with the research that we've had in years past, you haven't been able to figure out exactly what it is, So people, if they kill a gobbler and it's got a little bit of a red tint to it, they automatically assume I killed a red phase. I had a buddy that did that, and he tried to find out. He sent pictures to people and stuff, but it had traits of, a reddish tint to the.
And you see that actually quite commonly in wild turkeys.
I've seen multiple.
I've killed multiple birds that had particularly their secondaries on their wings.
Yep.
They'll get a reddish hue to them, and that's beautiful. What is that? I don't know.
What about leucism? Because we have one of the things we're seeing in duckDNA is we'll get birds that'll come in. The plumage looks similar. They're not albino, mostly blonde mallards. You've heard about blonde mallards. What we have seen is that, and we're still building the data set, but a percentage of those are 100% wild. We've had 100% wild black duck, 100% wild mallard. Both were hens. That were leucistic. And then we had one, it was a blonde mallard, but it was, I think, 90% game farm, maybe 10% even domestic or something like that, So, but the two purely wild leucistic birds were like, that's really cool. Do you have any idea if that exists in wild turkeys?
Well, if you read earlier text, then yes, it's considered to occur in wild turkeys, but it's considered to be extremely rare.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. And again, back to why we're doing this is, and I think my suspicion is what we're going to find is we're going to see everything from some of these birds are 100% wild turkeys and they have odd plumage. We're going to perhaps see that some of these birds at some point in a generation, either now or long ago, have hybridized with something else. And these traits are just persistent in the population and they're popping up through time. And we may see things we're not even expecting. To your point, Matt, about upset turkey hunters, I will tell you unequivocally that is not the goal of this.
For sure. And I meant that more jokingly.
For sure. And I've already...
Still an interesting bird.
100%.
And so I'll recount the stories of two people that have already provided us with samples.
Wow.
And both of those people told me without question that they are super interested in understanding what they harvested.
Yeah. And I think that's
they were clearly proud of the harvest they made. They appreciated the bird for how stunning it was. They both had institutional knowledge about the birds. They had seen the bird before. The bird was living in the wild with other normal looking turkeys around it. And they were able to be successful, and they were jacked up about it, and they should have been. And so that's a sample size of 2, right? N equals 2. But the fact that both of the interactions I had were very positive, they were very inquisitive, they were interested, they were appreciative to the point of, Doc, just tell us what we need to do to help you out. We are so, this is so interesting to us. That to me speaks volumes. Yeah. And I'm sure some folks will get upset. Well, that's not the point. Is to expand our knowledge base and to give us a piece of information that has been needed for quite some time. Yeah.
And there are probably people listening to this saying, show us the birds. I want to see the 2 birds that you're talking about. I just say, be patient.
Be patient.
Be patient. Yeah. The tissue, by the time this airs, we'll know whether the tissue has arrived at the lab.
Yes, right? That's correct.
So this is more kind of the nuts and bolts of things. How will the sampling take place?
Yeah. Good question.
Will it be the same way duckDNA is, or can you explain a little bit about, because some people listening to this podcast episode, this may be the first ever podcast episode they've listened to, and they're like, what's duckDNA? Or how are you going to go about getting some of the, you know, the tangibles that you need to get the results? So can one of y'all speak on that?
Yeah, well, if you haven't heard of duckDNA, go to www.duckdna.com. Check that out for the tissue collection. All right, so let's say for this year, because what Wild Turkey DNA looks like next year and how we distribute, how we select participants and distribute samples next year, we're still working on. Right, we still Mike and I were even brainstorming on this as we were driving into work this morning, and I was like, that's something we actually might be able to use for duckDNA next year. So there's some
synergistic.
It's pretty
5
cool.
weeks ago.
And so for this year, request a kit from wildturkeydna.com. If you, after providing that photo, don't go to that and select it until you harvest one of these unique looking birds, and send or email the photo to Katie. And then if you're selected, we'll get you the kit. Yeah. And we're still experimenting with the way to collect the tissue. For duckDNA, what we do is we request people cut a 1/4 inch of the tongue of the duck's tongue, drop it in the vial that has a buffer DNA, RNA buffer solution in it, and then you can freeze it until it's ready to be mailed, and then it's going to be mailed to UTEP. Postage is going to be included, so they can just drop it in U.S. mail, and it gets to Phil in his lab a few days later. We are right now hoping that that the tongue from a turkey will also work. We haven't tested that yet.
I see.
We're waiting on Phil to do the DNA extraction from a piece of tissue taken from the tongue. A turkey's tongue is different than a duck's. This was funny because I don't even know if it had even crossed your mind, because I was sitting back and I was like,
it did not, no.
just stepping through all the different little parts of this, and I said, what the heck does a turkey tongue look like? So I go to the Google machine, and it wasn't very helpful. And I told Mike, I said, is it somebody found, I forget exactly where, I said, we need a photo of a turkey tongue. And so you had some folks down in Florida that harvested a turkey, and they cut some of it out and took a photo front and back, and said, that looks different than a duck tongue.
Really?
We need, it
really
looks like there's some
to it.
real hard cartilaginous stuff at the very tip of the tongue.
Okay.
And so I was like, I don't know how easy that's going to be able to cut through. And so I told Mike, I said, we need videos. We need a video of somebody cutting through this tongue, because you don't want to put instructions out there if you haven't tried them. And so sure enough, these things were not as easy to cut through
as a duck.
You would not believe the conversations that I've had with people over the past
about cutting a turkey tongue.
I'll bet you there's been more text messages out of my phone with the word tongue in it than ever in my entire life, because we just didn't know. I don't typically play around with a turkey's tongue when I shoot a bird. I will be honest. I have had a number of kids that I've guided through duck hunts that I have, particularly northern shovelers, I would show the tongue because it's so cool and it's so specialized with their bill. But anyway, so I started sending. I haven't started hunting yet, so because I've been working my tail off on this. But I had friends in Florida, and so I started texting, outfitter buddies and folks that are down there hunting. I'm like, hey, man,
need a tongue?
Can you? Yeah,
I wish I had one of them photos.
Can you cut the tongue out? And I started getting input back saying, Mike, this thing is like it's different. And so what we've kind of concluded with is, instead of cutting that a turkey's tongue, the tip of the tongue is very gristly.
Okay.
Right behind that little bit of gristle there's a lot of tissue right there. So we've kind of settled on, with duckDNA, the hunter's asked to clip about a 1/4 inch of the tongue. For Wild Turkey DNA, we're going to, if you flip the tongue over and look at the underside, you'll see a little bit of white tissue on the tip. If you cut right behind that white, it's about 3/8 of an inch.
Okay.
So just a little bit more. And it that seems to have plenty of tissue associated with it.
I'm gonna get
Has it been discussed what other ways of collecting tissue would be, if not the tongue?
We have that. We're trying to do the same thing. Duck DNA, by using the tongue, you're avoiding complicating a mount or anything like that. And at least, for both of those species, I don't know anybody that consumes the tongue or otherwise even messes with it.
So it's the easiest to access, really.
Yeah, and a lot of taxidermists that are mounting turkeys are not. They're not using the head
or the head. Yeah.
So they're discarding. Some are discarding the head. So the tongue, in many ways, is just it's
not used after.
No.
Yeah. After.
No. So yeah, it's been interesting the last week or so of getting videos sent of extracting tongues, and it's been fun. So.
I'm trying. I'm almost there.
While you're getting to that,
hang on.
What will we know through the testing? Like, what are some things that you will for sure, once you get the results back, you'll be able to look at and say, okay, we do know this, we do know that, we do know that.
So from this initial year, what we're really seeking is at a minimum, is this bird a wild turkey? Is it 90% wild and 10% something else? What is it?
Yeah.
And regardless of what the answer is, what did the bird look like? Yeah. Right? What is the plumage character relative to the genetic profile?
And that just the more those you get, it'll be way more easy to identify whenever you do. Even just like if you get, let's say, the 75 in and you test those 75 and, year after year, you get 5 turkeys that look the same that for a fact, like it's this and this, then you'll be able to say, hey, more than likely, we know that turkey's X, Y, and Z.
It will at least help us be able to predict out, okay, that bird looks like what we tested that was a true wild turkey versus something else. But moving forward, what we are seeking when we expand next spring in 26 is simply there are so many questions of management value that we're looking at. Genetic diversity in wild turkey populations. Are we seeing hybridization between subspecies, and what does that look like? And what do those birds look like, and where do they occur? Are we seeing issues where, like we talked about off the air before we started, are we seeing issues where during restoration, turkeys came to a particular state or region from, say, 5 or 6 different sources, and now suddenly have any of those sources disappeared from the population? In other words, have those lineages of birds, are they gone from the extant population? And if so, the birds that are persisting, where did they come from? What's their lineage? Because the way I think about it, and the way from talking with Phil about it, is if we can identify within our current populations, particularly populations that are doing quite well, if we can figure out genetically where those birds came from, and if there's any commonality amongst populations as to where these birds came from and that they're persistent, then from a management standpoint, that's a valuable piece of information because those lines are hence more fit than others. And turkey populations, I think anybody listening to this that's a turkey enthusiast, particularly if you live in the South or the Midwest, you are fully aware of the ongoing population declines that have occurred in many areas. And this work will potentially provide a partial answer as to are genetics involved with any of these declines? It's the cause. Mike, are you saying it's the cause? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, could it be a piece, a component,
one of the factors
to try to understand? Because I'll be honest with you guys, that people like me that see these declines and are constantly asked about these declines, I'm trying to turn every stone.
Yeah,
that I can't quit what I do for a job until I turn every stone. And this is a stone that has not been turned ever. And so turning this stone with this initial year and then expanding to a range-wide assessment using the powerful techniques that we have now, that is a big stone to turn, because it had, in my eyes, it has tangible, direct management implications. And we just need the information. And I think we're probably going to learn some things that we're not even contemplating right now. And if we do, that's great. That's how science evolves.
Sure.
And you know, I've had some people ask me, well, okay, so, you know, what do you do from here? And I answer, I say, well, that's science. Science is an iterative process, right? So we're literally just dipping our toe.
Had that conversation just this morning.
Yeah, we're dipping our toe in the first pool, and the information that we get back from us is going to allow us to refine the questions we're asking, to refine our approach, to craft our thinking and the hypotheses and the predictions that we make. And that's how science should work. I mean, so that we're literally at the very beginning of that process, where duckDNA was several years ago. And I hope that people are going to embrace it the same.
Yeah. We've got the turkey tongues.
Got the turkey
This was pretty crazy. So on the left, obviously, that's the top side. The on the right, that is the underside.
Wow.
And I think, I don't remember which one this was, but one of these, someone sent me just the one on the left. And I was like, I want to see this. I want to see the underside of it. And the top side looks completely different from, you know, the potential ease of cutting through it than does the underside, right? So that underside looks like some keratin-based structure or something like that. And so we're still, by the time this comes out, we will have guidance, and we'll have.
Can we see that again?
And we'll have videos that we'll put out and guidance on all these types of things.
So that picture on the left, if you look at the bottom, you know, the tip of the tongue, it's very rough. As you can imagine, you know, you've got a bird, a large bird that eats literally everything, and they can consume all kinds of prey. But on the right, what you're seeing is that underside. It appears from our initial kind of digging around, and that right there at the back of that silver, where that silver transitions to white. If you were thinking, and we'll know this for sure here within a day, if you cut right there, that's the sweet spot.
That's the spot.
And you get plenty of tissue, and it's red, so it's got plenty of DNA in it.
So might not be as easy as cutting through a duck tongue.
It will not be.
And so snips or clippers or whatever may be advantageous, but it's going to be possible. We know that. It's just a matter of where in this tongue are we going to have to go to get the flesh.
Yeah, and some of my folks that have been removing the tips, they've done it. It's not difficult with a sharp knife.
Yeah,
it does appear to be easier with a pair of scissors. It's very simple with a pair of scissors. There's a clip and it's over in a second. The knife, you just have to put a little pressure on it, but it clips through fine.
And I have no idea, how far out to the side can you pull a turkey's tongue? Like with a duck tongue, it's pretty easy. It's pretty long and pull it out to the side.
You can easily pull it out to the side and put it on a hard surface right beside the bird's head and cut it right off.
A beak of a turkey ain't that long.
Yeah. So,
pretty crazy.
Well, so who knew? I mean,
this is nuts.
6 weeks ago, I didn't know a lot. I thought I knew a lot about turkeys, and I do. But I did not know about turkey tongues. Yeah. And I've learned a lot in the past few weeks.
I've harvested a lot of turkeys and seen a lot of turkeys harvested, and I've never even really thought about turkey tongue.
You don't. And I had never.
You don't even think about it, really.
No. Yeah. One time when I was young, I shot a bird, and I sat down and just went through him entirely. Like, I was by myself. I was in college, and I literally spent the entire morning just picking this bird apart because it was fascinating to me. And that's the one time I've really monkeyed around with a tongue. But I was 20 years old.
Yeah,
wow.
And I'm not telling you how old I am now. Yeah, that was 5 years ago. But I am a lot older than that now. So that's how long it's been since I really sat down and monkeyed around with their tongues.
I'm literally just sitting here so excited just to, finally, like I said, Dr. Mike mentioned it to me, and when he did, I was just like, I hope this happens.
I had to say, we don't know if it's going to happen just yet. So,
Yeah.
so don't
For sure.
Not
For
get too
sure.
excited just yet.
And-
but we're there now.
Just even the possibility.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you said, we've never flipped this stone. Nobody's ever flipped this stone whenever it comes to turkey genetics from this side of things.
Yeah, I mean, the last broad assessment was done, and it was published in 2002. And there's of course been turkey genetics works since then. But the last really big, broad, range-wide type assessment was back in 2002. And my wife, God bless her, she complains that I'm a workaholic, right? And I am. But I'm so passionate about this, about what I do and this bird. And she's been telling me the last couple of weeks, she's like, you're starting to concern me. Like, you are really like, you're clearly excited
Dr.
about
Mike,
this.
I think you got a feather right there.
Yeah. and she's like, you're really getting a bit out on the limb here, if you will.
Tanya's going to be tired of wild turkey DNA pretty soon.
She is already sick to death of it. She's like, I'm so tired of hearing tongues and kits and vials and but it's fun.
We got a couple of other things here, Matt. I wanted to let people know that we have already a Wild Turkey DNA Instagram account and Facebook account. And already we haven't made a single post and 441 followers. And this is actually dated a few days. So we are, again, following on the success and lessons learned from duckDNA. That was a game changer for the engagement with us once we were able to start sharing some results. It'll be a few weeks. It'll probably be a couple of months before we have results from any of these early samples to share. But there will be messages going out through Wild Turkey DNA, the Instagram account. That's one of the easy ways, best ways for our team to communicate with participants and those that are interested in participating. I'll also show I believe this graphic is final. We may change a few things there on that tongue, the illustrating how and where to cut the tongue tissue. But this was put together, modeled after what we did with duckDNA. We changed a few things around, the positioning of various bits of information, sort of in response to what we have learned. And so, there's going to be an app. That app is not live. And it's not like it's not a standalone app. It's a web app, the same as what we do with duckDNA. And that URL will be for the people that have been selected to participate. That's where they will go to enter all the additional data associated with the turkey that has been harvested and from which they're collecting the tissue.
Wow.
Yep.
So, but same process from that standpoint as duckDNA, and just super excited to participate in this. I'm really excited to hear about the engagement that you get from your hunters, because for us with duckDNA and our participants, it's off the charts. And in terms of the support, the excitement they have for it, as well as I do, Mike, that everybody, well, not everybody, it's not uncommon for people who want to take jabs at Ducks Unlimited or any other conservation organization. The one that's out there doing the work are the ones that make themselves available for criticism and all that type of stuff. But this has been so encouraging and just exciting is the best word, to see that uniformly positive engagement from the people that care about this resource so much, to get engaged, share their time, wanting to be part of this and contribute to new information.
Yeah, cool. I completely agree. And I'm a fanatical turkey hunter, and turkey hunters are just different people. They just are. They are different. And I have never been around a group of people that are more passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity to collaborate on this type of project that engages and relies on turkey hunters to provide the information that is going to advance the science of this bird, to me, one, it hasn't been done. And two, it really offers the turkey hunting community a way to put their thumbprint on the science, if you will. And to me, that's incredibly impactful.
Without them, we wouldn't be able to do it. Right?
Exactly. I mean, without the cooperation of turkey hunters, this doesn't go anywhere. So And again, the conversations I've had have all been incredibly positive. And it's exciting to enter into something like this. There's a lot of, obviously, there's trepidation. The fact that you've already walked the path with duckDNA makes my walking of the path much simpler. But there's still a lot we haven't figured out, and there's a lot we're going to learn as we go through this, and that's pretty exciting.
There will be a need for folks to be patient. These samples the results don't get turned around overnight.
Sure.
It's 8 to 10 weeks. We're going to try to speed up some of these initial samples. The other thing that I will point out is that Ducks Unlimited is an active partner in this, and so especially for this first year, you might go to, if you're selected to be a participant or something of that nature, you might go somewhere associated with this and see a Ducks Unlimited logo, or it might look like a Ducks Unlimited website. I mean, that's because we are an eager partner in this, and we'll try to get some of that stuff a little bit more customized for turkey interest going forward. So just kind of know that if you land on a Ducks Unlimited page when you're trying to do some of this, that's okay.
You're not lost. You're not lost.
Yeah. But we are super excited to be partnering with NWTF and you and everyone that's involved in this.
Yeah. And part of that just stems from the fact that, we decided, are we going to talk about this or are we going to do it? And so we did it.
Put your money where your mouth is.
There's a little bit of, this will become cleaner looking through time. But yeah, if you're going through the process of interacting with folks through the app or through the website, and you see something that says, Ducks Unlimited or DUs, like, you're not lost. You're in the right spot. It's just we were and still are trying to make this process as smooth as possible and as efficient as possible. Yeah.
Well, both Dr. Mikes, I can't thank you enough for taking time to hop on the podcast and explain. And I'm excited that I'm sure that this will lead to another podcast on the road, and we'll get to come back and talk about some of the cool birds that have been submitted. So I'm just super excited about what's ahead for this opportunity. But thank you both so much for hopping on the DU podcast. Also want to thank Rachel and Chris Isaac, our Ducks Unlimited podcast producer. And also thank you so much for tuning in to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.